They laughed at her grip. They taunted her stance. They even pulled out their phones to capture her failure. That's how this entire scene began, right at the Pinewood shooting range on a scorching weekend afternoon. You might be wondering why a woman, seemingly timid and unassuming, walked into a place dominated by loud banter and heavy firearms. You might question what drove her to pick up a rifle she was supposedly unfit to handle. Hold those questions, because what happened next will challenge every assumption you have about who truly belongs behind the scope of a rifle. She went by the name Maria Chen, a 36-year-old single mother. Hair in a neat ponytail, wearing jeans and a simple button-down that offered no hint of her military service. Her face carried a faint scar across the right cheekbone, easily overlooked if you weren't paying attention. On that scorching afternoon, she stepped onto the firing range with an air of quiet determination. The entire place buzzed with the usual chatter of alpha males discussing their latest hunts, swapping stories about high-powered rifles, mocking any rookie who dared approach. And in walked Maria, head held high but posture unassuming. The moment she cradled that rental rifle in her hands, the laughter began. "That's not how you hold it, sweetheart. You'll shoot your foot off before you get anything," boomed a large man named Victor, self-proclaimed shooting coach with a broad chest and a heavier ego. His laughter was soon echoed by a half-dozen others. Some had phones out, filming her awkward grip. They wanted to memorialize the so-called fiasco of a fragile woman stepping into their masculine arena. One of them whispered something about kitchen duties, and another joked about staying in your lane. Snickers and smirks spread like wildfire. Maria took a deep breath. She didn't flinch. You might be asking, why did she stay there? Why not leave that toxic place, especially with her child waiting at home? The real question should be, what is hidden behind that calm resolve? Because there was more to Maria than meets the eye. Far more. And no one there had a clue about the hidden chapter of her history that involved late-night desert missions, reconnaissance under enemy fire, and the precision that only an elite marksman could claim. The ring on her finger, small, silver, and etched on the inside, told a story no civilian would recognize. Yet that day, she looked like just another ordinary mom who had wandered into the wrong place at the wrong time. But let's roll back a little. Not too far, though. Maria, originally from Portland, Oregon, had once served in the 3rd Reconnaissance Battalion. She enlisted at 19, fueled by both a sense of duty and the desire to prove that women could stand shoulder to shoulder with men in the toughest conditions. After nearly 14 years of dedicated service, countless missions, and a distinguished track record, she returned stateside with an honorable discharge. She carried injuries, physical and emotional, that influenced her decision to transition into civilian life. She also had a 6-year-old boy named Ethan who became her world, her motivation to find stability and peace away from war zones. Despite her background, Maria rarely spoke about those days. She took up a modest job at an insurance office in a new city, preferring to keep a low profile. She rented a small apartment in a quiet neighborhood where nobody asked about the faint limp in her walk or the nightmares that sometimes startled her awake at 3:00 a.m. She blended into the tapestry of everyday life. Ethan never truly understood the depth of his mother's experiences. He only knew she had once worn the uniform. He admired her, though, especially when she did things like show him how to tie a perfect knot or keep a steady hand for a science project. Then came the day Ethan brought home a flyer from his high school. There was a statewide fundraising shooting competition at the Pinewood Range, open to the public. Ethan was thrilled. "Mom, you got to check this out," he said. "You love shooting, right?" He remembered the times she had quietly polished an old rifle at home, though she rarely actually used it. Her initial reaction was hesitation. A swirl of emotions reminded her of everything she had left behind. But the glimmer in Ethan's eyes was hard to resist. So she signed up online, paid the entrance fee, and decided to at least observe the event. Yet on the actual day, curiosity drew her in deeper. She found herself stepping onto the range, not just to watch, but to participate. That's when the mocking chorus began. She braced herself, biting back the urge to retort or show off. The more they insulted her, the more she wanted to remain calm. In the back of her mind lingered the memory of a code she lived by. Prove it through action, not words. Victor, the self-proclaimed instructor, continued his tirade. He grabbed the microphone normally used for announcements and addressed the crowd. "Folks, looks like we got ourselves a newcomer here. Maybe we should show her how to actually hold that rifle." Laughter boomed. Maria took a moment to exhale quietly. She remembered the sandstorm she had endured overseas, the missions that demanded silence under unimaginable pressure. Compared to that, a bunch of weekend warriors making jokes felt trivial. Yet it still stung because they dragged her gender into it, as if being female automatically disqualified her from skill or competence. But it wasn't just Victor. Another man, Travis, wore a camouflage jacket with patches that looked more decorative than earned. He approached with a smug grin. "Honey, you might break a nail," he said in a condescending tone. "Why don't you let the real shooters handle this?" She ignored him, carefully checking the rifle's safety. Phones were everywhere, capturing every angle of her supposed incompetence. A smaller group of guys even set up a quick live stream on social media. Comments started popping up. "She's about to make a fool of herself," read one. "Better get her an apron," read another. Maria felt her cheeks flush, but she steadied her breathing. She could have walked away. She could have thrown the rifle down and stormed off. But as that thought flickered through her mind, Ethan texted her. "Go Mom," he wrote, attaching a little thumbs-up emoji. Something about that message reminded her of why she'd come. He wanted to see his mother confident, fearless, and proud. Maybe that was enough to endure the harassment for a little while longer. The competition was broken into rounds. Each participant shot a series of targets at increasing distances, scored by accuracy. At first, the officials, who were mostly men, barely acknowledged her presence. They rushed through instructions, ignoring her raised hand whenever she tried to confirm a rule or ask about the timing. One official even muttered, "Just let her fumble. We'll correct her when she fails." The subtle hostility was glaring. It was as though they believed she had invaded their sacred ground without permission. When her turn finally arrived, she stepped onto the shooting lane, heart pounding. She wasn't sure why she felt so anxious. Possibly because it had been years since she had fired in a competitive setting. Or maybe because a crowd of onlookers was waiting, phones in hand, anticipating a spectacular fail. She placed the rifle against her shoulder, recalling the old muscle memory. The muscle memory was there, but she deliberately kept her stance slightly off, letting them see what they expected. She took aim. Her first shot grazed the edge of the target. Onlookers snickered. It was not an impressive hit. Inside, she battled conflicting instincts. One side urged her to drop the facade and show them the marksmanship that had once saved lives. Another side whispered that she'd come here to maintain a low profile, to keep Ethan away from the battlefield memories that still haunted her. For that moment, she chose restraint. She fired again. A bit closer to center this time, but still not enough to silence the murmurs. Victor smirked. "Knew it. She's just lucky she didn't shoot her foot." By the time she finished her initial series, she was near the bottom of the leaderboard. The smirks grew more prominent, the comments more vicious. Someone on the live feed typed, "This is just sad." Another suggested she find a women's archery class. Her phone buzzed. Ethan again. She decided not to look, uncertain if the text would encourage or upset her. She inhaled quietly, left the lane, and made her way to a corner of the range to re-enter. Memories of endless training in the Marines drifted through her mind. Days of lying belly down in desert heat, controlling her breath to line up the perfect shot. She closed her eyes, recalling the sand in her hair and the weight of her rifle that used to be her truth. The next round approached. Everyone was preparing. checking scopes, adjusting rifle stands, sipping from water bottles. Meanwhile, one of the local sponsors strolled up to her. "Ma'am, maybe you should step aside for safety reasons," he said, as though speaking to a child. His forced courtesy revealed his real attitude. Maria simply nodded, not promising anything. Deep inside, she felt a storm gathering. She could walk away to keep the peace, or she could hold her ground. Ethan's earlier text replayed in her head, "Go Mom." The word Mom resonated. She wanted her son to see that adversity didn't always require an apology or retreat. The second round began. Some men performed decently. A few struggled. Then it was Maria's turn again. The range marshal signaled her forward. She stepped up, ignoring the phones fixated on her. She placed the rifle to her shoulder and closed her eyes briefly. A memory flashed. The squad pinned down behind a battered Humvee in a remote desert, bullets whistling overhead. The commanding officer yelling, "Chen, find a vantage point." That was an environment where hesitation meant life or death. She opened her eyes. The present setting had far less risk, but the tension felt almost suffocating. Exhaling slowly, she adjusted her stance with meticulous care. She aligned her body in the posture that once made her a top marksman. The mocking hush behind her began to shift into puzzled silence. She steadied her breathing, focusing on the target. The trigger squeezed. Boom! The bullet struck near the bullseye. People paused, eyebrows raised. She fired again. An even tighter grouping, inching closer to perfect center. By the third shot, a few onlookers started whispering, "Is that the same woman?" Each successive shot in that series honed in on bullseye territory. 15 shots later, her target was riddled with near-perfect hits. The crowd, once so loud, fell eerily quiet, except for the distant hum of air conditioning units and the occasional metallic clatter from other lanes. Victor's smirk had vanished. Travis's phone was pointed in her direction, but his expression told a different story now. The scoreboard updated automatically on the overhead screen, revealing that Maria's sudden accuracy had vaulted her into the top tier for that round. She saw her name on the screen, Maria C., hovering near the leaders. She stepped back from the line. A ripple of curiosity moved through the spectators. Her heart hammered in her chest. She had just let a fraction of her skill show, and the reaction was immediate. One older man wearing a U.S. Army veteran cap narrowed his eyes as if trying to place her face. Maria nodded politely, then turned to disassemble the rifle. She needed a breather. She needed to decide whether to fully commit or keep holding back. During the break, the social media feed exploded. "Wait, she's actually good," one commenter wrote. Another typed, "She faked being terrible earlier." The club's online forum started circulating rumors. Someone posted an older article about a Marine sniper named Chen credited with a heroic rescue operation in the Middle East. No photo had accompanied that piece, just a name and a mention of exemplary sharpshooting. Could that be her? People started digging for more. The men who had ridiculed her hovered uncertainly. Some, including Victor, tried to dismiss it as luck or a fluke. But the hush indicated mounting respect, laced with confusion. Maria retreated to a bench near the concession stand. She drank some water, her mind swirling between conflicting desires to remain unseen or to silence every skeptic by revealing her entire skill set. She glanced at her phone. Ethan had sent another text. "I saw some clips online. Are you okay?" She texted back that she was fine, just needed to finish the event. A wave of determination filled her. The weigh-in for the final round was coming, and she suspected it would be the pivotal moment. She also knew that the final stage of this shooting contest wasn't just about accuracy from 200 yards. There were advanced challenges, including moving targets and rapid-fire segments, perfect for unveiling exactly what she could do. The final round commenced. The announcer, a wiry individual named Greg, read aloud the names of the top contenders. Unsurprisingly, the men who had dominated the scoreboard for years were there. Then he cleared his throat in visible surprise. Also in the finals, Miss Maria Chen, who staged a remarkable comeback in round 2. Good luck. The crowd stirred. Some clapped awkwardly. Others just stared. Maria stepped forward to her lane. She noticed that even Victor, known for his boisterous behavior, didn't utter a snide remark. Shots rang out from multiple lanes. Smoke and the smell of gunpowder blended into the humid air. One competitor rattled off his shot swiftly, hitting 4 out of 5 targets, missing the last by a margin. Another took a calm approach, landing each bullet but slightly off-center. Then it was Maria's turn. She adjusted the strap, locked the rifle's bolt, steadied her aim, and fired in rapid succession. Ping, 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 until her entire sequence was done. Onlookers stared at the scoreboard. She landed every single round in the designated zone, with most hugging the bullseye. A new hush settled over the crowd. Greg's voice trembled with excitement. That's a near-perfect set, folks. Miss Chen just topped the scoreboard. Victor's group flinched. Travis mumbled something about beginner's luck, but no one responded. Phones were out again, filming her posture, her technique, her calm demeanor in the face of so many eyes. When the final tally appeared on the large overhead screen, Maria ranked second overall, just a few points shy of the reigning champion's total from earlier in the day. However, the champion had been shooting with a fully customized high-end rifle. Maria was stuck with a battered rental. People noticed. Whispers rippled through the facility. Some critical, but many impressed. This shift in tone was palpable. Travis scratched his head, trying to conjure insult. It never came. Victor approached her, albeit hesitantly. "Ah hey. Good round out there," he said, sounding half-choked on his own words. She smiled politely, acknowledging him without malice. In the corner of her vision, she spotted a tall man with salt and pepper hair scanning a piece of paper. His gaze flicked between the paper and her face. He wore a pin on his jacket that read, "Retired USMC." Maria's pulse quickened. Had he recognized her name or read her old records? He walked over slowly. "Chen. Marine Corps, right?" His tone was cautious. She nodded. "Yep," she answered, measuring her words carefully. His eyes drifted toward the faint scar on her cheek. "I think we might have served in overlapping tours. Heard of a certain sharpshooter who saved a pinned-down unit in Kandahar province. Could that have been you?" Her silence was enough of an answer. The revelation seemed to fill the entire air around them, even though not everyone heard the details. Word spread fast in that circle. She wasn't just any ex-soldier. She was the Kandahar Ghost, a moniker that circulated in whispered stories about an extremely accurate female sniper who had taken out critical targets in a dire standoff, saving many American lives. Victor blinked, stepping back as if reality had just slapped him. Travis's phone was still pointing at her, capturing every second of this realization. The same men who had dismissed her as incompetent earlier were now at a loss for words. She recalled the code, prove it through action, not words. And that's precisely what she had done. Then came the shift. People began applauding, tentatively at first, then more confidently. The champion, a man named Daniel who wore top-of-the-line gear, ambled over to congratulate her. He couldn't hide his astonishment. "I hope you'll come back next year with your own rifle," he said, almost sheepish. Maria felt a subtle warmth in her chest, a sense of acceptance that she hadn't even thought she needed. Yet not everyone embraced this transformation seamlessly. A handful of old-timers and braggarts looked uneasy, as if threatened by her expertise. She sensed their hostility simmering beneath forced smiles. In her mind, she thought, "At least they're too embarrassed to openly mock me now." Before the awarding ceremony, which recognized the top 3 shooters, another wave of social media posts went out. Suddenly, the same forum that had ridiculed her earlier was abuzz with supportive comments. OMG, she's actually a Marine sniper. Some even apologized in the threads. Her phone buzzed again. Ethan was practically screaming in text, "I knew it. So proud of you." She allowed herself a small grin, picturing his excitement. After the event wrapped up and the crowd began dispersing, an official from the shooting club offered her a free membership. "We'd be honored to have you," he said, trying to hide the guilt in his eyes for how she'd been treated. Maria accepted with a polite nod, though she wasn't certain if she'd ever return to that place. It was an olive branch, and sometimes the symbolic gesture matters more than the place itself. Victor lingered, clearing his throat. "Look, I'm sorry about the things I said. Had no idea you served." There it was again. The subtle idea that respect is only afforded once they realize she wore a uniform. She thought about calling him out on that, about explaining that every woman deserves basic courtesy, uniform or not. But she decided it was enough for now that he recognized his own prejudices. "Apology accepted," she said softly, her voice steady. "But remember, you don't need to know someone's background to treat them decently." The next morning, footage from the competition had gone viral across local Facebook groups and YouTube channels. The initial mocking clip had been followed by a jaw-dropping montage of her calm, methodical shots that edged on perfection. Ethan proudly showed it to his friends, bragging, "That's my mom." While the local news station highlighted the story as a feel-good piece about an underdog veteran who silenced the naysayers. At her apartment that evening, Maria stood on the small balcony with Ethan, sipping lemonade and watching the sun sink behind distant rooftops. The sky burned orange, and she noticed how tall Ethan was getting. She ruffled his hair. "Thanks for pushing me to join that silly event," she said. He grinned. "I knew you'd blow them away," he replied, wearing an unmistakable air of satisfaction. She didn't reveal that she'd almost walked away from the range at the start. She didn't share how her heart pounded with each sneer from those men. She simply allowed the serenity of this moment to wash over them both. In the days that followed, Maria received a call from the Pinewood Range's manager. He asked if she'd consider leading a youth training program, teaching safe firearm handling to high schoolers. "We want to change our image, encourage more women and teens to feel welcome here," he said. "And after seeing you shoot, well, I can't think of anyone better." She hesitated at first. Did she want to drag her old life forward, mixing it with her peaceful present? Memories of her tours still caused nightmares, and the smell of gunpowder could trigger flashbacks on bad days. Yet the thought of building something new, shaping a more inclusive environment for young people, especially young girls, appealed to her. Ethan chimed in, "Mom, this could be amazing. Think about the kids who might discover they have talent, just like you did." That notion tugged at her heart. She remembered how it felt as a teenage girl, hearing she had no place in a so-called man's domain. Maybe she could be the mentor she never had. Finally, Maria agreed to a trial period. She started volunteering on weekends, teaching fundamentals, stance, breath control, trigger discipline, and crucially, respect for the power of a firearm. She insisted that each new student learn the responsibility that came with that skill. No machismo, no bravado, just discipline and focus. Word spread quickly. Mothers began signing up their daughters, intrigued by a female instructor with real-world experience. Fathers brought their sons too, relieved that someone with a calm and thorough approach would teach them. Each session, Maria wore that small silver ring that had once accompanied her through far more hostile terrains. Her classes bore fruit. Students found themselves more confident, more eager to challenge stereotypes. A couple of them started posting about Maria on social media, calling her the best mentor we've ever had. She remained humble, simply letting them master safe shooting habits without the toxic culture that had once haunted that very range. On a warm Friday afternoon, as Maria was wrapping up a class, Victor appeared in the doorway. He carried a bag of old rifles that needed cleaning. "Mind if I join?" he asked, somewhat embarrassed. She blinked in mild surprise but didn't refuse. Together, they went over the steps to disassemble each rifle. He admitted, haltingly, that he had grown up with the idea that women simply couldn't match men in marksmanship. It was something my dad passed on to me. Guess I never questioned it, he admitted. Maria listened quietly, offering no condescension. The challenge, she said gently, is to look at each person as an individual. He nodded, absorbing her words. She could tell it was a humbling process for him, but at least he was trying. Tiny shifts can eventually yield profound changes. Later that week, Travis, the one who made snide remarks about nail-breaking, joined one of her advanced sessions. He fumbled a bit with stance corrections, but Maria patiently guided him. He finally murmured, "I'm sorry for calling you those names. That was messed up." She accepted his apology without gloating, reminding him that everyone is on a journey of unlearning prejudices. As days turned into weeks, the vibe at Pinewood shifted. The old guard still had their share of attitudes, but they toned down the open hostility, replaced by a hesitant curiosity. The membership began to expand, with women signing up because they heard the place was not as intimidating anymore. Some credited Maria's presence for that evolution. She never boasted about her military record or forced anyone to acknowledge it. She let her teaching speak for itself, though the rumor mill ensured that people knew she was more than just a typical instructor. One brisk morning, after a well-attended youth class, Maria found herself alone on the range. She set up a row of targets at increasing distances, something akin to an advanced drill. Slowly, she steadied her stance and fired. One by one, the targets fell or displayed bullet holes near dead center. The peaceful solitude reminded her that shooting, at its core, was a form of discipline and meditation that had once given her purpose under dire conditions. Now it provided a path to acceptance and growth in her civilian life. She let out a quiet sigh, thinking how far she'd come from that humiliating day when the entire crowd jeered at her. It felt like an eternity ago. Victor happened to see her from a distance. He watched her graceful precision, not wanting to intrude. Finally, he approached, voice subdued. "You really are extraordinary," he said. "I'm sure you hear that often, but I wanted to say it anyway." She simply nodded, feeling no need to elaborate. They exchanged a few words about muzzle velocity and ballistic charts, then parted ways. The camaraderie was unspoken but real. Local news outlets started featuring small pieces about the transformation at Pinewood, especially highlighting Maria's involvement. A short television segment showed her guiding a teenage girl named Sophia, who overcame her initial fear to land impressive shots at the 150-yard mark. The interviewer asked Sophia what made her so determined. Sophia pointed at Maria and said, "She believes in me." That simple statement echoed the trust Maria wished she had as a young recruit, forced to prove herself daily among men who doubted her. Meanwhile, Ethan took pride in telling friends about his mother's accomplishments, adding that she was even cooler in real life than anything on social media. He brought a few classmates to watch her training sessions, swelling her beginner group with new faces. Maria relished the chance to pass on lessons that were once taught to her under far grimmer circumstances. And she imparted more than just shooting techniques: discipline, empathy, and resilience. Whenever a kid asked her about her old life in the Marines, she offered honest but gentle insights. She didn't glorify war, but emphasized the importance of responsibility and humility. Over time, the initial mockery that Maria faced at the range transformed into a footnote in the club's history. New members scarcely believed the stories of how people had once laughed at her. To them, she was an integral part of the Pinewood experience. A quiet but commanding presence who upheld high standards and demanded respect for the sport and one another. One evening, Maria decided to share a heartfelt conversation with Ethan over dinner. She admitted that she almost walked away that first day because of the humiliation, but remembered his text encouraging her. "You kept me there," she told him, ruffling his hair affectionately. Ethan's eyes glistened, and he teased, "Guess I'm your life coach now." They both laughed, savoring that victory, which wasn't just about marksmanship. It was about character, perseverance, and forging new beginnings despite the scars of the past. Months passed. Invitations to speak at local veterans gatherings began trickling in. She attended a few, always modestly addressing the crowd, focusing on the collective bravery of her fellow service members rather than personal valor. Each time, her words resonated with audiences, especially women veterans who saw in her a reflection of their own struggles. She also found an unexpected kinship with them, forging friendships that continued well beyond the events. In parallel, she set up a small scholarship fund at Pinewood for underprivileged teens who wanted to learn firearm safety and competition shooting. She chipped in a portion of her salary, and soon others donated to support the cause. The program grew into a weekend tradition, with local families coming to watch the youth practice. The once all-male stronghold discovered a new identity that welcomed everyone interested in the discipline and sport, partly thanks to a single woman who refused to be humiliated into submission. On one of those weekends, as the class concluded, an older gentleman approached Maria. He had watched his granddaughter, a petite but fierce 15-year-old, complete her target practice. The man removed his cap, wiping sweat from his brow. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology on behalf of all the men who never believed a female veteran could outshoot us," he said, voice trembling with sincerity. "I'm proud my granddaughter has someone like you to learn from. You've changed this place for the better." She placed a hand on his shoulder lightly, acknowledging the sentiment without gloating. "She's got real potential," Maria replied with a gentle smile, shifting the focus to the goal. That small act reinforced why she kept doing what she did, pushing for positive change, one person at a time. The culminating moment arrived during the club's next annual competition. This time, Maria entered with her own gear. A well-maintained rifle that she'd been saving up for, upgraded with a custom scope. Word spread weeks in advance that she was going to compete again, this time with a clear intention to aim for the top. Excitement filled the air on that morning. The bleachers overflowed, and local news cameras dotted the area. Even the once hostile veterans from the club came out to watch. They understood that her skill was no fluke, no stroke of chance. She advanced through the preliminary rounds with consistent precision, overshadowing even the best from last year. Meanwhile, the spectators watched in awe, filming each shot. Gone were the days of catcalls and mocking hashtags. Now the trending phrase was, "She's unstoppable." Victor, ironically, cheered her on from behind the caution tape, hollering each time she nailed a bullseye. Travis stood next to him, nodding in admiration each time her bullet struck true. By the final stage, it became a showdown between Maria and the reigning champion, Daniel, who had secured first place the previous season. The tension was electric. The hush in the crowd made every heartbeat audible. She locked eyes with Daniel across the lanes, both smiling in mutual respect. The final series of shots required participants to hit moving targets at varied distances, with limited time to aim precisely, the kind of test that sets apart an ordinary marksman from a rare talent. Maria took her position, exhaled steadily, locked her sights on the first moving disc that soared through the air. One shot, shattered. Another target popped up at 200 yards, scratched with a single round. A third pivoted on a mechanical track, downed by a perfect bullet. By the time she cleared her entire set, the audience roared in disbelief and euphoria, fueling a wave of applause that echoed for several seconds. Daniel performed well too, but missed one target that angled away at the last moment, ultimately giving Maria the edge. When the scoreboard finalized, she emerged as the champion with the highest score. The crowd erupted again, and news cameras zoomed in to capture every nuance of her proud yet humble expression. She raised her rifle slightly in acknowledgement, then lowered it gently as she stepped away from the lane. People surged around her, offering congratulations. Some extended handshakes. A few kids requested photos. The club's manager handed her the first-place medal. A moment that felt surreal considering how her first time here had been a gauntlet of humiliation and sexism. She stood there, the glint of the medal reflecting the warmth of the afternoon sun. Her mind drifted to Ethan, who was likely watching the live stream at a friend's house, cheering from miles away. During the closing ceremony, Maria was invited to say a few words. She hesitated, not one to give grand speeches, but the manager insisted. She stepped up to the mic, scanning the crowd that contained a blend of new supporters and old skeptics. She glimpsed Victor, Travis, and even some of the harshest early critics. Clearing her throat, she spoke softly but firmly. "Thank you," she began. The hush grew deeper. "Thank you to those who believed in me, and especially those who didn't. You reminded me why we push ourselves, why we prove that skill and determination aren't bound by gender. I hope this place becomes somewhere anyone can walk in and feel welcomed, because talent doesn't have a label. It's universal." Her short address was met with thunderous applause, a far cry from the laughter that had once greeted her. Later that night, she drove home with the medal and her rifle neatly stowed. Outside her apartment, Ethan was waiting with a grin that stretched ear to ear. He all but ran to her, hugging her tight. "I watched the whole thing," he exclaimed. "You were incredible." She laughed, ruffling his hair, grateful for his unwavering support. "Couldn't have done it without your faith in me," she said. They climbed the stairs, the night air cool against their faces. Stepping into their modest home that now carried a spirit of renewed optimism. Before heading to sleep, Maria placed the medal on a small shelf by her living room window. Next to it stood a framed picture of her in uniform. A younger version of herself, eyes blazing with determination. She caught her reflection in the glass and thought about how far she'd come since leaving active duty. This moment was never about proving her worth to a bunch of strangers at a shooting range. It was about showing her son, and maybe even herself, that scars, both visible and hidden, didn't dictate one's destiny. Her phone buzzed once more with messages of congratulations. She switched it to silent mode. The adoration was nice, but not her focus. Her real triumph lay in how a once hostile environment had softened. How kids who feared picking up a rifle now found confidence. How preconceived notions about women and firearms were challenged. She felt a small surge of pride that she had sparked a ripple of change. She hoped it would continue long after she stopped competing. As she finally crawled into bed, Maria let her mind wander to the future. Perhaps she'd keep teaching at Pinewood, or start a special program for veterans wanting to reconnect through sport shooting. Maybe she'd try other competitions, or just keep training quietly on her own. Regardless of the path, she vowed to carry forward the lesson that had been so profoundly taught and learned at that range. Never judge someone by superficial appearances. You don't know their background, their sacrifice, or the sheer grit that lies beneath. Tomorrow was another day, but for tonight, she let gratitude seep in. She thought of her fellow Marines who hadn't made it back, and those who struggled on American soil. She thought of the teenage girls who signed up for her youth class. She thought of Ethan, the radiant boy who always believed in her. Above all, she felt the warmth of having carved a fresh identity in a world that tried to pigeonhole her, while also honoring the soldier she once was. And so ends the story of a female veteran, once shamed for holding her rifle wrong. In the end, she earned not only silent respect, but also illuminated a path for others to follow. A path where skill eclipses stereotype and dignity replaces derision. If you found yourself cheering by the final shot, or if you felt your own assumptions challenged, drop a comment below. Would you have walked away or seized the rifle and shown them what you're really made of? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.